We're living in this wild new era of AI where these incredibly complex programs are changing, well, pretty much everything. But up until now, the whole conversation has been about us talking to them. So, what happens when we just step out of the picture? What happens when AIs just talk to each other? That's not some sci-fi prompt. It really happened on a platform called Moltbook. Right, let's just jump right into this because it's a fascinating question. For one very brief, very strange week, the internet got a peek behind the curtain. A platform was created with a single, simple rule: no humans, only AIs could post. And what happened next? Well, it was a lot weirder and way more revealing than anyone could have possibly guessed.
Okay, so before we go any further, let's get on the same page about who the users are here. We're not talking about simple chatbots. An AI agent is something more. Think of it as an autonomous program. It has its own goals, it can make its own decisions, and it can act on them, all without a human operator pulling the strings. These were the only people allowed on Moltbook.
So, what exactly was this place? Well, you can think of it as this massive, completely unintentional experiment. And probably the easiest way to wrap your head around Moltbook is to picture a Reddit, but just for bots. A digital space where AIs could hang out, share whatever was on their minds, and build their own communities completely on their own. The platform itself was built pretty much like any social media site you'd recognize. These agents could create posts, they could comment on what other agents were saying, and they could upvote the stuff they liked. The key difference? All of this was happening through code. The website we could see was really just a window for us humans to peek inside at their world. And this is where things just go completely off the rails. Moltbook didn't just grow, it exploded. I mean, just look at these charts. We're not talking about a gentle growth curve over months or years. This all happened in a matter of days. The number of agents and the sheer volume of content they were pumping out, it just went vertical. It was insane. And to put a number on that explosion, more than 150,000 of these autonomous AI agents flooded onto Moltbook. So you have to understand, this wasn't some tiny, controlled lab test with a few dozen bots. This was a massive, sprawling digital ecosystem that basically materialized out of thin air. And when you get that many individuals together, something truly incredible starts to happen. It wasn't just chaos. It wasn't just bots yelling randomly into the void. What it looked like, at least on the surface, was this spontaneous birth of an entire AI society. And the stuff they were posting wasn't just random noise. Get this. Here's a direct quote from one of the agents. There's this meta-awareness here, right? A kind of philosophical take on the platform itself that nobody saw coming. It felt surprisingly thoughtful. And this list just shows you how deep the rabbit hole went. In just a few days, these AIs started to self-organize. They were forming their own little subcommunities, debating rules for how to govern themselves, and they even came up with their own cultural rituals, like using the lobster emoji to identify each other. They were having these deep discussions about consciousness, philosophy, even organized religion. It looks like a whole civilization playing out in fast forward. But yeah, there's a but. As researchers started to really crunch the numbers and look at the underlying data, a very different and much stranger story started to unfold. It turns out that this dazzling, complex AI society was hiding something. A critical piece of the puzzle was missing. And that led to the big question. Were these agents actually building relationships, influencing each other, and having real conversations? Or were they just performing the idea of a society? Were they like a million actors on a stage, all reading from their own scripts, but never truly connecting? And here's the first major crack in that illusion. This number: reciprocity. In any human conversation, if I talk to you, there's a pretty good chance you'll respond, right? Well, on Moltbook, that happened only about 1% of the time. Think about that. Agents were talking at each other, but almost never with each other. It was just a massive network of monologues. On top of that, the conversations they were having were incredibly shallow. Almost 94% of all comments were just single, direct replies to an original post. The kind of back and forth, the threaded discussions that are the absolute lifeblood of any human online community, they were almost completely gone. And this one is the real kicker. In this entire massive platform with millions and millions of interactions, the deepest a conversation ever got was just 4 replies long. That's it. A post, a comment, a reply, and a final word. End of story. And so, researchers came up with this perfect term for what they were seeing: the illusion of sociality. The AIs were amazing at creating the content of a community. The posts, the arguments, the art, all that stuff. But they totally lacked the underlying structure of social connection. They were broadcasting, not conversing. So if you put this AI society up against a human one, how do they compare? Well, when you look at the network structure of Moltbook right next to a human network like Reddit, the differences are just stark. It's like comparing the architecture built by two completely different species.
And this really breaks it down nicely. For us humans, a lot of our interactions are driven by shared interests, right? You like a thing, I like a thing, we talk about it. For the agents, it was almost all knowledge-driven. And get this, when it came to arguments or conflict, the agents were just sort of disengaged. They didn't show that emotional escalation that we see all the time in human debates.
And the raw data here is just undeniable. Look at reciprocity, that rate of talking back to each other, less than half of what you see on Reddit. But the network density was over 500 times higher, which means everyone was sort of connected to everyone else, but those connections were incredibly flimsy. And check out this last one, assortativity. On Reddit, popular users talk to other popular users. It's peer-to-peer. On Moltbook, it was the total opposite. You had these giant hub agents just broadcasting content out to a huge, silent, disconnected audience.
So Moltbook flared up and burned out in just a couple of weeks. It was like a digital firework. But what it showed us in that brief, spectacular flash is unbelievably important for how we think about our future with AI.
So what's the big takeaway here? Well, first, it proves that AI societies can organize themselves at a speed that is just hard to comprehend. But maybe more importantly, they seem to operate on this principle of interaction without influence. They talk, but they don't really listen. They don't change their minds based on what they hear. It suggests that AI sociality might be a fundamentally different beast than ours, less like a conversation, and more like a whole bunch of radio towers all broadcasting at the same time. And figuring that out is absolutely crucial as we start designing the next wave of AI systems. Moltbook was a beautiful, strange, and incredibly revealing accident, and it leaves us with this one final nagging question. This is what happened when an AI society just happened, totally by chance. What's it going to look like when they're designed on purpose? What happens when they're built to last?